I would like to discuss the topic of curating the perfect reading list. The older I get, the more I realize that our time is so limited, and how am I ever going to read all the books I want to read? And this led me to decide that I wanted to talk about this topic. I want to share how I decide on which books to read and how I handle things. I do think that my system is very different from what other readers do, so let's dive in. First of all, I am a planner, so I love making lists. I love getting my reading organized, and this always gives me something to read. I never run out of reading material. I do not set the goal of reading a certain amount of books. I think that is nonsense. Like, for example, one reader say, I want to read 100 books a year. And I don't think that that is the right way to approach reading. I think we should look at it as in hours a day instead of books a year. My goal is to read 2 hours a day at least. And I find that more important and more how do I say this? More rewarding than reading a certain amount of books every month. And trust me, I was such a reader years ago. I used to care about the amount of books that I could consume in a month. And I'm so happy that I am not that person anymore. What really changed everything for me was when I started reading more difficult books, because it forced me to slow down, and I suddenly realized that what I got out of a book was more important than the number of books that I was reading. And I would rather read 2 books a month or 3 books a month instead of 10 if I got something out of those 2 books, and if those books changed something in me. Because I kind of expect from a book that it changes something in me. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but it does have to have a certain influence on me. I also love rereading. And I think there are so many readers out there who say, I never reread a book. There is so much out there, which I partly understand, but isn't it such a shame to never reread the books that just blew you away, that you loved so much? Isn't it a shame to never spend time with those characters ever again? For example, I have read Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo, I think 6 times, and I cannot imagine never picking up that book ever again. Same goes with Les Miserables, with The Count of Monte Cristo, Tolstoy's works. Like, I couldn't imagine only reading those books once. Anyway, I am digressing. But here are some questions that I ask myself and that you can ask yourself too, concerning what to read next. So first, what works will I regret not having read? Secondly, do I want to read the entire work of a certain author? For me, that is Victor Hugo, Tolstoy. There are so many authors, Oscar Wilde, where I want to read everything that they ever produced. Are there any authors for you out there? If yes, make a list and work through that list. So that is one of the lists that I keep. I keep a list of my favorite authors and their works. But I also keep a list of the works that my favorite authors loved. And let me tell you, I have discovered such amazing novels, such amazing authors by working my way through that list. It's incredible. I highly recommend you do this. Which leads me to the question, how can you ever run out of reading material, right? Now, if you are a mood reader, because there are readers out there who call themselves mood readers, and they cannot follow a certain list. They pick a book. They pick the book that they're in the mood for. I am not a mood reader at all. I can just work my way through a list without any problem. I do have this thing where when I have read, for example, 3 novels that are very tragic, very dramatic, that I'm in the mood for something lighter, but it's not that I cannot follow a certain list. So how do I curate my reading list? If you're a mood reader, this might not work for you, but if you're not, I think this might give you some ideas. First of all, I find references in the books that I read. For example, when I am reading a book of Leo Tolstoy and he references something from Shakespeare, I tap that passage, and when I finish the book, I just go over all my tabs with references to other authors, write them on a list, and I will eventually be able to work my way through. Number 2, I keep a list of books that other people recommend me. And yes, that includes you, because I have a list of all the books that were recommended to me. So if you ever recommended me a book, I have written it down on a list. So thank you for your recommendation. My next tip is to read an excerpt of the book that you're interested in first before making a purchase. We have everything available to us. We have the internet. Isn't that amazing? You can just read through a couple of chapters, see if the book is your cup of tea, if the writing style is your cup of tea, and then go and purchase the book. Or if you're reading classics, you can just go to Gutenberg. It's not always the best translation, but you can read classics for free if you want to. I use Gutenberg, which is a website with free classics. I use it all the time to see whether or not I want to purchase a book. I will almost never buy a book without familiarizing myself with the writing style, because it's so important to me. Or, and that is my next tip, I listen to like 20 minutes of the audiobook version of that book. And this also helps me decide whether or not to read a book. Also, once in a while, dare to challenge yourself with picking up a more difficult book or a book in another language that you are trying to master. And I promise you, the books that sometimes look so intimidating aren't that intimidating at all, and you will fall in love with those works. And this is how I always have something to read. I will never run out of reading material. What you can also do, by the way, I'm thinking about it just now, ask your best friends for their favorite novels and read them. Someone's favorite novel is a very personal thing, and if someone would take the time to read my favorite novels, I would feel so loved. It would be so special to me. Anyway, what I really want to put some emphasis on is time is so limited, and you really have to be selective. Make sure that you get to the books that you really want to read. Really try to set aside your reading time, the amount of reading that you want to do every day, and try to protect it by all means. Also, life is too short to finish a book that you don't like. So if you're like me and you're always trying to finish a book because you think it'll get better, it usually doesn't. It just doesn't. Like I can count on one hand the books that I didn't like reading the first half that I ended up loving in the second. I don't know, maybe a couple of times. And I still haven't learned my lesson. I try to give you this advice, but I find it very difficult to follow it myself. Also, don't be scared of big books. And if you're too intimidated, just set up a buddy read, Next month, we will be reading Middlemarch with my book club. If you're interested in joining, feel free to do so. The Patreon link is on my channel, and we have a group of book nerds, amazing people, love the discussions that are going on. So yeah, if you're intimidated by bigger books, you can just find a friend to read it with you. By the way, I have a video on reading big books. Go ahead and check it out.